Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
Just to review where we're at, those who've been with us know where we're at. We're talking about different ideas about God in Jewish thinking throughout history, to help us construct our own ideas about God as that goes into our davening. And we're in the Middle Ages. We talked about Maimonides, Rambam, who thought that God was outside of everything and inscrutable, indivisible, unreachable. Could someone just unmute and tell me you can hear me because my screen is frozen?
I can hear you.
Thank you. And in contrast to the Kabbalah, the Jewish medieval mysticism, which talks about the manifold aspects of God as they cascade down through a series of channels, which explains God's different aspects and different aspects of God in the world. And these channels are called sfirot, which sort of gets translated as attributes, which is kind of a not terrible translation. I am going to share my screen. So we talked about the Sfirot. I'm just reviewing. This is all review. And if you're lost because you're just tuning in today, then you really need to listen to, I think, the last two sessions, which introduce all of this. Outside of the 10 Sfirot, there is a realm called the Ein Sof, the infinite. This kind of corresponds to Rambam's God. We can't really say or know anything about it. Then the deity wills itself to become manifest in the world through these 10 aspects. The highest one is called Keter, which is also inaccessible to us. Bina, Chochmah and Bina, wisdom and understanding, or wisdom and discernment, two different aspects of God's intellect, also mostly unattainable by us. And then there are the so-called 7 lower Sfirot, and 7 is a useful number, as we talked about and we'll see again today. And by the way, you'll notice I didn't quite, I don't think I highlighted this last time clearly enough, but some of these aspects of divinity are seen to complement each other, complement with an E, not an I, and be either in tension or in balance. So we talked, for example, about Chochmah and Bina, undifferentiated wisdom, and Bina, more specific knowledge or discernment. They're kind of in balance with each other, and Chochmah is thought of as male, and Bina is thought of as female, masculine and feminine, and they're called Abba and Ima. Thank you. And you guys, Michael, Michael, how about if you mute? Michael, could you mute?
I bet they don't have
I just muted him. It's okay. I'm a co-host, so I muted him. Okay. Then we have Chesed and Gevurah, compassion or mercy, and judgment, which kind of corresponds to the rabbinic meaning Talmudic, Midat Hadin and Midat Harachamim, that we talked about a lot, God's attribute of mercy and compassion and God's attribute of judgment or severity. And they kind of complement each other, and they need to be in balance, in perfect balance, in something called Tiferet, which technically means beauty, but it's the beauty of harmony, the harmony of Chesed and Din being in perfect balance. Then Netzach and Hod. Here we have translations of triumph and majesty. They are prophecy and priesthood. And I kind of like, again, what Rabbi Deborah Silver of Vikar got from Institute of Jewish Spirituality. Netzach being striving and Hod being stillness. That works for me. Netzach and Hod. And they are in balance with each other. You can easily understand how striving and stillness are in balance with each other. Netzach was, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you an example in a moment. Yesod is male generativity, and Malchut is a feminine principle, again, which we're going to talk about at length today, because it's also called the Shechinah. So that's what we're going to get to today. So far, I'm just reviewing. I touched on, so one thing I just want to say is part of what the Kabbalah sets up is relationships between or among these sfirot. Bina and Chochmah are male and female, are in balance. Chesed and Gevurah are also sometimes seen as masculine and feminine. I won't go into that, but also clearly are in tension with each other and in balance. And striving and stillness, Netzach and Hod, are in tension with each other. Sometimes it's referred to as opposing principles, but I think of them not quite as opposing, although as a pure type you can see them as opposing, but rather in tension with each other, in tension with each other. This upper triad, Keter, Bina, and Chochmah, is referred to as Hamuskal, the intellectual, right? This second triad, Chesed, Gevurah, or Din, and Tiferet, is referred to as Hamurgash, which is kind of the emotional, psychological triangle, psychic, okay? Netzach, Hod, and Yesod are referred to as reflecting the word of Hamutba, the natural, okay? And the Kabbalah says everything that is created in this world, the actual physical world, our planet, emanates from these three, the lowest of the three triads. It's the world of the physical. And Larry asked last time a very good question, which is, all right, all this is interesting or not, but what does it have to do with davening? So I mulled this over a little bit, and I sort of thought, we do have brachot or parts of the service where we turn our attention to the actual physical world. What are some of those parts of our liturgy where we turn our attention to the actual physical world? It's a toss-up question, not a rhetorical question.
Birkot HaShachar?
Which part in particular of the morning blessings, Michael?
The opening brachot.
The opening blessing, in particular, right? Asher Yatzar, so-called the bathroom blessing, right? Where we meditate on our body and the amazing thing that the body works. So that's one place where we contemplate, let's call it, physicality of the world. Alan?
Would be in the first blessing before the Shema.
Or the first blessing before the Shema. Yotzer, where we contemplate the created world around us, the world of nature, and the thing that, while Alan is unmuted, stay unmuted, and the thing in the morning that cues us to contemplate the world of nature is what phenomenon? Oh, now I put you on the spot. What reminds us in the morning that the world exists, that God created the world in Yotzer? Light, the sun, right? The sun. The sun comes up, it's light out, and that cues us in to contemplate the physical world, or the corresponding bracha at night, Hama'ariv Aravim, right? First blessing of the Shema service at night, where it gets dark, right? The sky changes, it gets dark, the stars come out. And again, this is so whether it's morning or evening, the shifting of the day is the cue to us to meditate on. I think of the davening as actually meditating on, meaning it's a consciousness, davening is a consciousness enhancing practice, right? So to meditate on the natural world or the physical world. So surely there are other places. Some of the Psalms, by the way, we talk about the natural world, God makes the winds and the frost and all of that stuff. But the two classic places where we contemplate the physical world are those two blessings, Asher Yatzar, right? The bathroom blessing. It's the first bracha we say in the morning after Modeh, first blessing that we say privately at home, and the first blessing of the Shema, which talks about the physicality of the universe. I'm going to pause. You have to unmute, Michael. You have to unmute yourself.
I was thinking also just the sound of the rooster in the morning.
Oh, good. Sound of the rooster in the morning. Great. Excellent. And of course, some of the brachot in Brachot HaShachar where we say, my eyes see and my limbs stretch and all of that stuff. Good. Thank you. So we have a number of brachot. So again, I was thinking of Larry's question. And I thought to myself, well, stillness and I'm going to start the other way. Netzach and Hod, striving and stillness. So, how do we contemplate God's aspects? Last night I couldn't sleep because it was very windy and there was a tree that was thumping on my roof all night long and keeping me up. And it was a cue to me that the wind was powerful and a little bit scary, as it is, we know, in some places where it's whipping up the wildfires. And that, we might say, is an aspect of God's power in the world, as are, the waves on the shore, a volcano that erupts, lots of other things. Okay? Whereas stillness is, whatever your version of stillness is in the natural world. The veins in each individual leaf, something like that. Okay? So I think when we contemplate the natural world, we do get a sense at times of God's power as manifest through nature's power. And there are times when we have a sense of, I'm going to say, quiet, stillness. The waves can be pounding, or the waves can be a calm, unbroken surface. And these, I think, are vehicles. The Kabbalah would have us say, these are vehicles within the natural world to contemplate Netzach and Hod, power. And again, there's really no good translation for Hod because majesty in English sounds sort of like power to us because we think majesty means like kings, and that means power. Okay, but it's majesty in a different sense here. It's the majesty that you see when everything is still and perfect. That's how I think of it. So to Larry, that might be, a slightly weak answer, but that was my answer anyway. I want to pause for a moment just to see if anyone has a thought or a comment about that. Okay, the physical world, the natural world as a revelation of God, and aspects of power or stillness. I'll pause for a moment. Throw in your thing. Alan, unmute, please.
I just have a question connecting with all these things. It was my understanding from many, many moons ago that it was Tiferet that really controlled everything in terms of what was going on. It was like the central point and everything. It connected everything, the physical, the spiritual. It all went through Tiferet, which was at the very center. And in some of the diagrams, you see lines going all the way, connecting Tiferet with everything except maybe the top three, which is its own separate
right.
stuff.
So, as with any diagram of 10 things, we don't have, this is the human diagram. Where's the other diagram? Hold on, I'm scrolling.
The stick figure.
Yeah. So, it's like math. You can put, or vectors, you can put arrows in a variety of ways and say how this influences on that, right? Notice when I said the unfolding from above to below, it's not just Chokhmah unfolds into Bina and together they unfold, right? Or Chesed and Din connect to Tiferet. They're all connected to each other. So, Alan, this can be a very complicated system. We're going to talk about Tiferet connecting to Malchut in a few moments, if we get to it today, which I thought we were going to get to today, but we might or might not. And the importance, what Alan is pointing to, is the importance of Tiferet, which we'll get to, I think. Okay. Okay, that's what I think I wanted to say by way of sort of review. Okay, so I want to focus today, and it seems like it'll probably stretch into next time, on Malchut. So Malchut is yes, Michael. Sorry, unmute.
Yes, last week, if I'm not mistaken, you made mention of the theory that what happens up in the upper spheres here with the Sphirot affects us on Earth, and vice versa, that we have the ability to affect
Correct. It is bidirectional. Yes.
Okay. And it occurred to me that is extremely empowering. I can understand why it became popular among some people, because rather than just sacrifices or praying as a way to connect with God, that this gives us a stake in things. We talk about partnership with God. This is an example of somebody creating a system where we have actual power in that relationship.
I want to even change the verb, not a verb. You said, I can't remember what it was, but I want to change it to imposing. It imposes on us a partnership, right? Meaning what you do, again, there have been people, Kabbalists, who would say they believe this metaphysics to be real, actual. What you do, strengthening or weakening various sphirot, has an impact on I don't want to say the above realm, because we know God doesn't live in the sky. I was being metaphorical, but the up there realm. They say this, by the way, in Aramaic. There's whatever of Ila'ah and whatever of Tata'ah. Ila'ah is like me'al, or al in Hebrew, on, above, and Tata'ah is below. So what happens above affects what happens below, which means our realm, and what we do below affects the above. Correct. It is very powerful, and so and you can see that as inspiring, Michael, or as terrifying. Yeah. So the Shechinah is in exile partly because we do not return her to her husband. So now I'm going to get to that. Okay. So Malchut, which means kingship, and I don't know what that means. I want to say one more word. Sorry to Larry and others about, how does this work in prayer? And I said something about the 7, air quotes, lower sphirot, which are more accessible to us. 7 is a handy dandy number. Of course, it corresponds to the 7 days of the week and the 7 days of Sukkot up until Shmini Atzeret, and that's why there's a different sphira associated with a different day of Sukkot, and that's why we invite a different Ushpizin guest as the lead guest into our sukkah each night, because Avraham is associated with Chesed and Yitzchak is associated with Din, and then there's a whole system, okay, of the 7 ancestors, or the 7 weeks of the Omer, and each day of the Omer, each week of the Omer has 7 days, so you have a 7x7 grid, and certain Siddurim you'll see in small print. You count the day of the Omer, and it says something like Netzach Shebegvura, okay, which you would say on the 4th day of the 2nd week. All right, and then lately people have published, I have 3 of them, I'll just hold them up, these handy dandy Omer counter things. For people who are listening at home, here's what you can order, all of them online. One is by Simon Jacobson. He's a Chabadnik. So it says week 3, day 4, Netzach of Tiferet. Endurance is in compassion. Is my compassion enduring and consistent? Is it reliable or whimsical and unreliable? Right? And here's an exercise for the day. So there are people who have taken these sphirot during the Omer as a way to work on what we would call character or moral qualities, which are human reflections of the sphirot. Did everyone get that? An opportunity for us to work on character or moral qualities, which are reflections of the sphirot. So I have that. There's one by someone called Goldfeder, Goldfeder, the 50th Gate. So again, they're designed as one of the, these cute little flip books. And here's a book called Sephiros, right? Spiritual Refinement Through Counting the Omer by Rabbi Yaakov Haber, Haber. Same thing. Each day it says it's this sphira aspect of that sphira, this day aspect of this week. And here's what I'm meditating on today, and has questions and has self-reflection kind of things. And you could use any of these kind of as a diary. Wait, Michael. There's one more thing I want to say. Oh, and there's a whole book, which is now published in several English translations, called the Tomer Devorah, Tomer, Tomer, which is a different version of Tamar, meaning the date palm. Deborah, the prophetess, was sitting under a date palm in the book of Judges. It's called V'hi Yoshevet Tachat Tomer Devorah. She was sitting under Deborah's date palm, the prophetess Deborah. And so there's a book called Tomer Devorah, which is all about the Sfirot. And we talked about three aspects of the Sfirot: theosophical, understanding the realm of God; theurgical, which Michael just brought up, which is doing things to God, connecting to God and affecting God; and the third was really anthroposophical, psychological. So the Tomer Devorah is the psychological aspects of the seven Sfirot, and there's a chapter on each Sfirot and how you work on that quality or attribute in your life. And again, the purpose of it, of course, is theurgic, right? Because what we do down here affects the universe, but it starts out as sort of psychological, anthropological. It's about your inner self, your aspect of Gevurah or Tiferet or Netzach or whatever, and it also has a whole chapter on each one of these on how you work on that quality. Okay, Tomer Devorah is by Rabbi Moses Cordovero. It's from like the second stage of Kabbalah, which we haven't got to, which is Safed or Tzvat Kabbalah in the 1500s. We'll get to that eventually. Okay, there was another question from the Beth Am group. Question or comment? I saw a hand.
No, I was waving at somebody as they came into the room here. That's all.
Got it. Okay. Now I think we're going to get to Malchut, which I guess we're just starting. Okay. And we'll continue next time. So Malchut is referred to as the Shechinah. Now, we know, if we remember our rabbinic midrash, and share, if we remember our rabbinic midrash, the Shechinah, from the word lishkon, like the Mishkan, to dwell, okay, the Shechinah is a reference to some attribute of the deity. And in midrash, in rabbinic thinking, again, when I say rabbinic, I mean Talmudic, so I shouldn't say rabbinic, I'm just going to say Talmudic. In Talmudic midrashic thinking, Shechinah, it's not really worked out systematically. It just says, Israel goes into exile, and the Shechinah cries when we cry, and the Shechinah goes into exile with us. And it doesn't really say much else other than that. Okay? It's not really worked out. Is the Shechinah the same as God? Is it an attribute of God? So the Midrash doesn't really work that out. In the Kabbalah, this becomes very, very important. Okay? The Shechinah, if you remember, Hebrew is a gendered language. There's no neuter, and that imposes gendered concepts on things. God is either an El or an Elah, right? There is a word Elah, right? God is either deity, masculine, or deity, feminine. Can't have it both ways. Okay? The monotheistic choice was El, not Elah. I'm going to come back to that. Okay? And Shechinah, as you know from whatever amount of Hebrew you might know, because it ends in a kamatz he, an ah, is a feminine word. So the Kabbalah took this concept and greatly developed it and amplified it and said a couple things. One, the Shechinah is the feminine aspect of God, which is why the Shechinah is associated with Rachel Imenu, whose yahrzeit is today, our foremother Rachel. I said that at the beginning. The Beth Am group might have missed it. And I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to finish with this. And we're not going to talk more about Malchut or the Shechinah today. We're going to get to that next week, okay, because I want to respect time. But I want to take a step back to big concepts. Okay. There are a lot of forces in the world, and in polytheism, people believe there are many forces which sometimes which are disparate and sometimes might seem to be in conflict because there are many gods. So there's a god of war, although if it's Athena going to war, then it's a goddess, okay? And there's god of wisdom, and there's a goddess of love, and there's a head god, Zeus, or El Elyon, if you're a Canaanite, okay? And there are lots of different deities. And there are forces of nature that are imagined or projected to be masculine forces or feminine forces. And masculine forces are sometimes associated, it's usually, judgment is usually a male god in the Near Eastern world, except we have attorneys in our midst, okay? And in modern American attorneys, judgment is female, and she's wearing a blindfold, right? And she's holding the scales. So certain attributes could be conceived of as stereotypically male or stereotypically female. And very often, it's usually the god of war, not the goddess of war, but once in a while, like with Athena or Diana, there can be a goddess who's fighting. And very often, stereotypical female concerns, which have to do with fertility, childbearing, childbirth, are governed by goddesses. Okay, everyone with me? So you all know this. This is polytheism. The monotheistic revolution of Judaism said under Abraham, depending on what you believe, either under Abraham in the middle of the middle of the second millennium BCE, or if you read Freud, Moses in the 1200s BCE, or if you believe critical Bible scholars in the 800s, 700s, and 600s BCE, when the Bible's passages were being written down. Okay, but at some point, there is an idea that there is one force behind everything. These apparently disparate forces are not, in fact, different independent forces fighting with each other. They're all manifestations of one single force. The Midrash tells that in the very nice story that we all know about. Who is the first monotheist in the Midrash?
Abraham.
And how did Abraham figure it out in the Midrash?
Smashing the idols.
Before that, that's what he did as a result of figuring it out. But how did he figure it out? And remember, he sees that people worship the sun. The sun is the most powerful thing, right? But then the sun goes away and the moon comes out. He says the moon must be more powerful than the sun. And then the stars come out, and there's so many of them, the stars must be more powerful. But then they go away and the sun comes up again. And Avraham Avinu realizes that none of them is an independent force. There must be some force behind all of them. So that's the Midrash's storytelling way, right, in the Midrash Talmudic era, of saying you can recognize that there is one force behind it all. It's all a unity. Everyone with me? You knew all that already. All of this is just review. It's like Judaism 101. However, here's the glitch. The glitch is because Hebrew is a gendered language, and because people 2,500 or 3,000 years ago had trouble conceiving of a non-gendered God, we modern people say, of course God has no gender, of course God is not male or female, right? That's what we say. But people didn't think that way 2,500 or 3,000 years ago. They just weren't able to think that, okay? So there's one deity, there's one force, and spoiler alert, that force is imagined as male. Okay? So it's also all the verbs are male. Okay? And then we have certain ironies like that are a fallout of this. One irony is God has a quality called rachamim, which we usually translate as compassion or mercy, but which comes from the word rechem, which means womb. Rachamim really means a feeling that only a mother could have for her child, right? This feeling The only person who's capable of that feeling is someone who carried someone around in their womb for 9 months. It's called womb feeling. All right. So we say God has rachamim. God has womb feeling, because the quality of compassion, which might have been seen once upon a time in polytheism to be a female quality, all gets collapsed. Everything gets collapsed into the one deity. And instead of praying to goddesses for fertility, which people did in the year 1000 BCE, we pray to the masculine god for fertility. So just think of, all those fertility passages in Deuteronomy and Sefer Dvarim, right? If you obey me, then there will be, your flocks will be fertile and you will be fertile and everything will be good, as opposed to, if you don't obey me, I will shut up the heavens, which means the rain, in polytheistic terms, the rain will not come to impregnate the earth. Okay. I might have had that backwards. Yeah. Right, the rain will not come to impregnate the earth, and then there will not be fertility. And we're familiar with these ideas from, Greek mythology and Canaanite mythology and all of that stuff. And then Deuteronomy says, I want to take it back to the Bible, do not plant an Asherah next to the altar of Yud Ke Vav Ke, of Hashem your God. Do not plant an Asherah, which meant people would plant an Asherah, right? There's no law that says don't cut off your right arm, because no one wants to cut off their right arm. There are only laws about things that people would be likely to do, okay? So there was worship of Asherah, who is imagined or depicted as a tree, a symbol of fertility, next to the Mizbeach of Yud, He, and Vav He. And we have inscriptions from the Torah's time, I can't tell you exactly which century, which says, this thing is dedicated La Hashem v'la Asherato, to Yud Ke Vav Ke and his Asherah, meaning this thing is dedicated to Mr. Hashem and Mrs. Hashem. Okay? The great monotheistic revolution said there is no Mrs. Hashem. There's only one Hashem, and because of sometimes it gets criticized. I don't like when modern people criticize olden people for failure of imagination. It's not their fault that they were a product of their imagination, okay? But because of their culture-based and era-based failure of imagination, they couldn't conceive of this as agendered. It was masculine. Okay, so the unintended consequence is the goddess, and when I say the goddess, I don't mean like one goddess, I meant like capital G, the goddess, the female powers got squashed out. And we read about some of this explicitly. Jeremiah, after Yirmiyahu, the prophet, after the destruction of the temple in 586 BCE, a bunch of Jews flee down to Egypt, and Jeremiah sees the women baking cakes, something they brought to the temple, to the Queen of Heaven. And he says, how could you possibly be baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven? How can you be doing this pagan worship? Don't you realize the temple was destroyed because we did this paganism? And the women say to him, no, don't you realize the temple was destroyed because we stopped worshiping the Queen of Heaven? Okay, that's the problem. We stopped worshiping the goddess forces. That's why we were destroyed. So even after the destruction of the temple, there's still some debate about this. Everyone with me? Everyone with me? Ezra comes back with the Torah in about 450 BCE. Okay, 450 BCE. The temple is rebuilt in the 5 teens. So temple's rebuilt. Ezra comes back with the new constitution, which is a written version of the Torah. He reads it to the people. And it appears that by about then, let's just say 450-ish, the Torah comes to be the constitution of the people, and it's read before the people. The issue is settled. There's no more goddess worshiping. But Freud talked about the return of the repressed. You can squash it down, but it doesn't go away. So where and when and how does the, I'm going to call it, stereotypically feminine principle of the universe? Where does it go and when does it come back? So the short answer is it roars back in Kabbalah, and it is all stuck on the Shechinah. And to get back to Alan, what Alan said, its Tiferet is thought of as the male principle, which is most accessible to us. Chochmah is male, it's Abba, but it's pretty out there. We can't really do anything about it. It doesn't really pertain to us in a day-to-day kind of way. But Tiferet is seen as the male principle of the world. You might say, why isn't it Yesod, which is Yosef HaTzadik, which is the phallus? So I can't quite answer this for you because I'm not a Kabbalist, but the male principle is seen to be Tiferet, and the female principle is seen to be Malchut, the Shechinah, and we'll talk more about the feminized, this described as feminine aspect of God, the Shechinah. She's described as the bride or the sister or the daughter. They're a little fuzzy on which female relation it is, okay? And it is our job to unite masculine and feminine, to unite Tiferet with Malchut. So there's a lot of stuff in this Kabbalah, this level of the Zohar, and 100 years before and after, about whatever we do is supposed to do things. And by the way, there's Siddurim. I'll show you one next week. I thought I would do it this week, but we'll get to it next week, where it says, I'm about to do this mitzvah to unite basically Tiferet and Malchut. I'm doing this with the intention of I'm trying to unite the male and female principle. I want to take you back to the Midrash. Remember the Midrash that says, remember there's Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, and in Genesis chapter 1 it says, Zachar unekeva bara otam. God created them male and female. And Genesis chapter 2 says there was a male, and God did surgery and made a female. So which is it? Okay? And there are various explanations. One of the Midrashic explanations is that the first human being was anyone can unmute and shout it out. The first human being in Genesis chapter 1 was a
male.
No, it's male and female together. I forget what the word is.
That word is hermaphrodite, right?
Yeah.
That the first human was a hermaphrodite. It basically adopts the Greek myth, which is sort of a person with two faces, right? One front was the male front, the other front was the female front, and then God cleaved them in half. And by the way, what we translate in as tselah, meaning rib, in Genesis chapter 2, according to the Midrash, it just means side. God cut this into two sides, okay, into two halves. In the Greek myth, by the way, the Greek version, because the Greeks believed in like homosexuality was okay, which the ancient Hebrews didn't. Okay, in the Greek version, if you were originally male, female, that's why you're seeking out your heteronormative, as my children would refer to it, bashert, okay? Whereas if you were originally a body that was male, you'd be seeking out your male partner because you're reuniting with, as we say in colloquial English, your other half, your original other half. And if you're female, right, then female with female desire, then that's because originally you were a female being. So this is an explanation of why, of a lot of things, why there is heterosexuality, why people long, why a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife and they become one flesh, if I may quote Breshit, because we, according to the Midrash, we were originally one flesh. The original human being was a hermaphrodite. So dividing male and female, this will be my final thought for the day. Dividing male and female divided is not part of the original plan of the universe, according to Kabbalah. The original plan of the universe, based on this Midrash, is male and female united. Therefore, it is our sacred task to undertake rituals to try to unite male and female in Sfirot terms, to unite Tiferet with Malchut, and next time we'll talk a little more. I want to talk a little more about not Kabbalah, but just sort of our own understanding of God. What's at stake in the Hebrew monotheistic revolution of one deity, and that deity is conceived of as male, and then the female attributes are folded into God somewhat, rachamim, right? But God is really talked about as male. If I said to you, high holidays, God, what does God look like? You'd say, oh, it's an old man on a throne with a white beard, like Michael's, right? And he opens books and he's judging like a man judge, right? What's at stake with folding in the goddess principle or unfolding out and reclaiming the feminine aspects of the deity and the universe? And who cares? And does that matter? And what does that do for you or not do for you? So I think next time we're going to talk about this for another week or two. We're going to talk about two things. One is going to be the Shechinah, Malchut, the 10th or quote unquote lowest sphera, and how it gets related to or activated in Kabbalah and in Kabbalistic influenced prayer. Thing number one. And thing number two, what's at stake at all with the female principle versus saying, oh, God is agendered, of course, so male and female has nothing to do with it whatsoever. I think those are two themes that we will mull over. And it is 9:01 a.m. and here endeth the lesson. Be Torah, stay healthy, and God willing, we will meet again next.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.